All right, guys, I hope you're staying healthy, staying at home. We're going to get through this. You're just going to have to make sure you stay on top of Blackboard and be checking it every single day. So today we're going to be doing or talking about writing about literature because our literary analysis coming up this week. You're going to be drafting your introductions, and I'll get to that later on in the week. So for literary analysis, we've talked about this. You're studying the literature and you're interpreting it. You're giving some kind of insight into what you believe the deeper meaning is with this literature, and that is going to become your thesis statement. So there's several different ways. Again, we've talked about a few, but here's some other ways to do it. You want to look at how the various parts of elements work together to present the main ideas. So that would include looking at different stories and how those work together to convey a meaning that's only able to be understood by reading all the different stories or just a couple. You can look at how one piece or one short story fits into the complex whole, the entire work. You can look at how two works, so two short stories or two different elements may be profitably read together, meaning you're only going to understand this if you read these two stories together. You could look at more than that if you wanted. You can look at how one interpretation is more insightful than another. This is more typical when you're looking at classic literature because there's a lot of critique already written about it. There's probably not a ton about this book, but you can certainly find some. You can talk about how a work's value has been overlooked or misunderstood. Again, that might be a difficult topic for you for this book because it's so recent. I don't think there's a lot of criticism about it already. And then here's some more. We talked about a thematic analysis. I think a bunch of you are going to do a character analysis. You could focus on several different characters, how they're related, how they're different. I'm getting a phone call. And you can do a conflict analysis, and that could work well kind of within a thematic analysis. We talked about queer theory the other day. I know, Luna, you had mentioned wanting to do that. So I put some other theories and critiques down here. You can do a feminist approach, a Marxist approach, a biographical theory, race theory. So if you're interested in any of those, I can get you some information about what exactly that means, and I can help you. It's pretty interesting when you look at a piece of literature through different lenses. Okay, so when you decide, if you're going to focus on just a couple stories or the text as a whole, you want to reread the parts that you're going to be talking about, because every time you read, you're going to get a deeper meaning out of it. You're going to see something you didn't see the first time. And so when you're writing, you have to explain what you're seeing, but most importantly, why and how, why it's done the way it is. You're looking at why the author chose to do this a certain way and how he does that. It's very helpful if you read the biographical information of the author, because it can give you clues as to why a plot is the way it is, or why symbols are the way they are. Settings, we talked about all these settings seeming like they're from small town Kentucky, so that can be very helpful. I use this a lot in college. I remember on one paper I ended up arguing that the author was having an affair, and that was evident through his poetry and how his tone changed, and it was kind of fun to do. But anyways, you always want to read the first time for plot and then second for analysis. That goes back to the rereading and getting more information. And always look up unknown words or jargon that you don't know, because it can give you insight into meaning as well. Okay, so you want to look at the story's parts, and as you're reading, always ask yourself why. Focus on point of view, who's telling the story, who's the narrator, and why. The structure of the story, some of them we talked about, there's not really a resolution to the ends of these stories, and why do you think the author did that? The characters, we talked a lot about character in our seminar. Think about the setting, the language, symbols, style, tone, all of those that are working together.
Pardon the interruption, but if you've not completed the form that was sent in the update 11:55 a.m. email, please go on to your email and complete that form at this time. Thank you.
video and I'm trying to figure out who it was. Okay, sorry for the delay. I had people knocking on my door. All right, so yeah, all these things you need to be looking at when you're rereading, close reading. These are elements that you're going to focus on a lot in your literary analysis. So again, don't write in the books, but use those sticky notes to mark places where you see something interesting that you think you could write about. Okay, so now I want you to pause this video. And on Blackboard under week 11, there is an example for story of an hour annotations, and I want you to look at that very closely and look at the student annotations that are in blue on the side. Okay, so when you're writing about literature, first, you want to select a workable topic. We've talked a lot about selecting topics. We talked about it in our seminar, and then we were talking about it just now in the video. Make sure it's interesting. I have to read all of these, and I don't want to read anything boring. Make sure your topic is not too obvious or if it's insignificant, okay? It needs to be very in-depth, and it needs to be something unique, not something that's super obvious to every reader. You're going to have to present a clear thesis. This is the most important part of this because everything you write is going to tie back to this thesis. Again, you're providing new insight, something unique that not everyone is going to see on first read. So we have to know exactly what that is. So a bad thesis would be this story is about love. There's many things wrong with that thesis. Here's a good thesis. Through its repeated use of sewing imagery, the story emphasizes the tragedy of a tailor's wasted potential as an artist. That is clear. That is not obvious. It's obviously going to be talking about imagery and symbolism and the theme of wasted potential. So your thesis should be something similar to that. You follow literary conventions. Okay, so you may not have done this before. You may not have any idea what literary conventions are. So in your introduction, you always give the full name of the author and the work as a whole in the introduction. And for this one, I would also give the stories you're going to be talking about. You would probably want to put that in your thesis statement. After you've said the author's full name, then you can just refer to him by his last name. When you're giving titles of short stories, those go in quotation marks. When you're giving the title of the book as a whole, which Nothing Like an Ocean, that should be italicized. This is the biggest one that you're going to have trouble with because it's hard to get used to. You're going to discuss literature in present tense using third person, so no first person pronouns, and always use present tense when you're talking about the story. Now, if you're talking about history or some kind of event that happened in the past, then you use past tense. But anytime you're talking about the story, you use present tense like it's happening right now, because every time you open that book and read that story, it's happening right now. You need to figure out what's going to work organizationally for you. It's going to depend on your topic. So you might be talking about 3 different stories, and so each body paragraph could focus on a different story. Or you may need more than 1 body paragraph per story, though. So maybe you could have a paragraph about imagery, another about point of view, another about setting. Again, it depends on your topic, and once I know your guys' topics and thesis statements, then I can help you with organization. You're going to have to just experiment. You can try moving stuff around as we're writing to see what fits where. You have got to use a bunch of evidence in your essay because you're making an argument, and so you have to support it. We have to be able to see how you got the interpretation you got, and you have to be clear and convincing about it. So an unsupported claim would look like Robert feels sorry for himself throughout the story. Whereas if it's supported, you would say Robert's self-pity is evident throughout the story as he repeatedly thinks to himself, no one on this earth cares about me and there isn't a soul I can turn to. And notice those numbers in parentheses and how it's punctuated. Those are page numbers. You're going to have to cite page numbers in MLA format. And if it's not clear that what you're giving is a quote from the book, then you also have to put the author's last name before the page number. So it would just say Tomlinson 5. Don't assign meaning in your writing. So that burden is on you to show cause. We have to understand how you derived your meaning and how it's valid, why it's valid, and you have to lead your reader into understanding that as well. Don't just throw quotes into passages, okay? You got to clearly support your claim. And like I've harped on this already, analysis is not plot summary, okay? I'm having you practice this with the Hancock posters. Again, those are due Friday. I need you to take a picture and send it to me. But anyways, paraphrasing can be effective, but you can't overdo it, all right? If you just start summarizing the plot, then you're going to fail this essay. You have to be aware of this because it's easy to do. So what I would suggest is using a highlighter to track your plot summary, and if there's a lot, then you can go back and fix it. Okay, so that's it for writing about literature. Please, please, please let me know if you have questions, and you can email me, message me on Remind. I will get back to you. I'm going to be available from 8 to 3 every day, probably longer than that. And again, we just have to kind of do our best until we get through this. So make sure you're checking Blackboard every day and checking for announcements, checking your Remind, all that. Okay? Let me know if you need anything. Have a good one.